Okay, so Module 12 is going to end our journey in love and sexuality in regards to adolescence and emerging adulthood. And so, what we're going to finish up on is sexually transmitted infections or otherwise sexually transmitted diseases, so STIs or STDs. And the reason we ask about that is because you may have been wondering with the sexual activity of emerging adults, wouldn't they be exposed to a lot more of these type of sexually transmitted infections? And the answer is yes. Anytime you have multiple partners over a period of time, you do increase the amount of risk you have of contracting one of these things. So by age 24, 1 in 3 sexually active Americans has contracted an STI. So if you ever wanted to have good use of contraceptive when you're sexually active with more than just one partner for a long period of time, you probably want to go ahead and do that so you can avoid, because the odds are, as you can see, 1 in 3, pretty good that you will have or be exposed to that. 2/3 of all STIs are going to occur in people who are under 25 years old. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is because there's going to be more and partners being exposure in regards to that. And there's a higher odds of recreational sex versus what you see in later adulthood. Not that later adults don't, but it is a less frequently occurring phenomenon. Now, there are two important characteristics of STIs, one of them being asymptomatic. So, what that means is that people don't show symptoms of a disease, but that doesn't necessarily mean they can't spread it. And so, it can be one time maybe they're not showing symptoms, and then another time, boom, they are, but they've had it the whole time. So they're especially likely to infect others because neither they nor the person they're having sex with know that they're infected. And not unless they have good health care and have had something looked at, do they actually maybe have to take precautions. There's also a latency period on STIs, so it could be years before people begin to show symptoms and even know that they're infected. So it can be really hard to track down. It's one of the roles that our public health agency, any infectious type of disease, they try to short and look at. Actually, there is one documentary, The Lost Children of Gwinnett County, came on Frontline back in the 90s that I used to show and have as a assignment in our class. And the way they tracked the sexual activity of these group of teens was through a chlamydia outbreak through the public health system. They would have never known about it otherwise. And it was very intriguing on kind of the role that they played. During the time, they may be infecting others, of course, with either themselves, without either themselves or their partners being aware of it. So just like with being asymptomatic, that latency period, they could still spread it, but maybe they're not showing outward signs of this particular disorder. And STIs are the highest in emerging adulthood. Now, there are various types of STIs. We're not going to go through all of them. My wife, who's a pediatrician, I like to call it the gross out journal because they always had some skin lesion or STI on the front cover. Tell you if anything needed to be wrapped before it was delivered. That is it. Spends the most time with its cover turned downwards. Not pleasant stuff to look at. So some of the most common, you have your HPV, which is the human papillomavirus. It is the most common, and by age 24, 1 in 3 sexually active Americans have contracted it. So it's widespread. There are two types of HPV. There's asymptomatic, and then there's those with genital warts. And I believe the HPV, yeah, I think it has increases odds of cancer too. Chlamydia is the second most common, very highly infectious, has the highest rates in adolescents in emerging adulthood, and affects 1 in 7 adolescent females, 1 in 10 males. Fortunately, there is a vaccine for it, and there are also antibiotics. And so I believe that chlamydia can be controlled, but boy, do you really want to go through that? And then, of course, one of the more pernicious ones is HIV/AIDS, and it destroys the immune system, has a very long latency period, at least 5 years before AIDS actually appears. The good news is we have come up with ways to not cure it by any means, but to maintain it from overwhelming the immune system through kind of a drug cocktail. And so it isn't the death sentence that it was when I was growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, when that was one of the big kind of things that people were talking about. So STIs are out there. They certainly can cause harm. Some of them can be cured, but things like HPV or HIV cannot. They can only try to be treated and to minimize any symptoms that are a result of it. So on that cheery note, we are going to wrap up and finish Chapter 9 on Love and Sexuality. So stay tuned for Chapter 10.